Hello everybody, my name is ResiCraft, and I'd like to review one of my favorite games, Genshin Impact. It's been a mixed experience, and I thought I'd share my opinion on it. In the end, I'm going to give it a rating, but I'm going to have to separate it into three parts, as I have a lot to say about it, and some ideas I'd like to concept out. The three separate parts are the problems with Genshin, what's great about Genshin, and what I'd change about Genshin. To start off, I'm going to begin by saying I love Genshin. I've been an active player since 2020. I've played through all but 3 of the events since it was first released. I have every single character besides Shiori and Sejuin. I have spent far more than I'd like to admit on this game, so with all that time and money put into Genshin, I feel I have a fair judgment of what Genshin does well and where it is lacking. Seeing as I want to end on a good note, I'm going to begin where Genshin is its weakest. Genshin's daily gameplay loop, excluding exploration and story quest, are 4 randomly selected commissions in one of the many regions of Tibet. These commissions vary from fun mini-games of jumping on mushrooms while avoiding touching the ground, to talking to multiple NPCs several times in a row. Some of them can be fun, but the majority of them are extremely simple and boring things to do. The majority of the time, you will end up spending 2 of them fighting hilly trolls or abyss mages, who have either constructed towers or are spreading evil. These typically end in seconds depending on the party you bring, or even worse, the hilly troll tower daily commission. This commission can be easily done without even fighting anything. This can be done by simply shooting at it from a distance with any of the bow users in the game. I guess you could argue that commissions being easy is a good thing for people who are new or on devices that make playing the game harder. But for someone who's been playing on PC, these are tedious and were required for daily free Primogems. Fortunately, Hoyoverse changed this so that people could use Exploration and Archon Quest in place of the daily commissions. In Genshin, when you get a character through the gacha system, you can use them for anything. For daily commissions, against world bosses, in story quest, and in your Serenity pot. Fortunately, you can use them for everything. But the moment you see them in a story quest, they have no idea of who you are. I understand that it would be hard to make a story with characters already familiar with you, but making cutscenes the first meeting of characters takes away the passion you feel for this person. For me, it upsets me that I had been at my party for over 2 years, but he acted as if I've never met him. It makes me question what it means to have characters in your party. Are they just imitations of them that we meet? Or does the traveler have the ability to clone other people's abilities? What does that mean if we've never met them before? Now, I know I'm probably looking too far into this, but it is quite immersion breaking to meet this person once through friendship levels, and then the story has you meet them an additional time, but for real this time! Another example of this is characters missing after the Archon Quest are over. You meet all these wonderful characters in the Archon Quest, and then they vanish from the open world. It's as if they were only present to meet the traveler and address whatever situation they are in, and then they leave. Literally, you can visit the Jade Chamber at any time, but Ningguang, the person it belongs to, lives there and works there every day, is never there. Jean, Albedo, Kea, Lisa, Sucrose, Klee, Noelle, Mika, and Amber are never at the Knight's headquarters, their place of work, or anywhere around Mondstadt. I understand they want them missing because they can be in your party, but the characters simply being not present does take away from the immersion that they worked and lived there. This just makes the game feel empty, with the only people left to talk to being the lifeless NPCs whose designs are repeated in every region of the game. They kind of remedied this with events they've been having where you can find the playable characters around the regions, but I gotta be honest, this just shows how the characters being there makes the towns and regions feel more alive. I have to acknowledge the gacha system. It's unarguable that it is by design addictive and predatory to people with addictive personalities. I will not argue for gacha. The only favor Genshin has is its gacha system is far from the worst and is simply doing what most mobile games are doing now. All content in Genshin is doable without spending a single dollar. That being said, certain characters do give gameplay advantages, but it isn't required to do the content that Genshin has to offer. The gacha of Genshin is when you wish for characters or weapons featured on either the standard banner or the featured banner. The standard banner is the set of 5-star characters and weapons that were in the game when it was first released, and all 4-star characters after their release. The only problem with all 4-star characters being put into the standard banner is it continues to get harder to get the 4 stars you want, as the options that wishing pulls from has been steadily increasing since version 1. It was easier to get Bennett from the standard banner when there were only 15 other 4-star characters, as compared to now, where there are currently 39 other 4-star characters that can be pulled. So far, only 2 5-star characters have been added to the standard banner, Tainari and Dia. Tainari was added to the standard because he was the first 5-star Dendro character added to the game. A wish has a 5.2% for a 4-star weapon or character with a pity of 1 4-star for every 10 wishes, and a 0.6% for a 5-star character or weapon with a pity of 90 wishes. To top things off, the 5-star characters and weapons, after you achieve this 0.6% wish, there is a 50-50 chance that the thing you are wishing for isn't the character or weapon on the banner, but instead a 5-star weapon or character from the standard banner. After failing that 50-50 chance, the next character or weapon is 100% going to be the one on the banner, but you have to get that 0.6% chance again to get the featured character or weapon. These chances are multiplied if you want to get any of the characters' constellations as well. Constellations in Genshin, according to the Genshin Impact Fanon Wiki, are sets of sequential upgrades to characters which are similar to the passive talents and increase the effectiveness of the character or add new capabilities to existing abilities. To get a constellation in Genshin, you must get the character again, and for a full constellation you must have gotten that character 7 times. Once to simply own the character, and 6 for each constellation. In short, gacha bad. Genshin bad for using gacha, but Genshin is just another mobile game that uses this predatory system to make loads of money. Much like the gacha system, Hoyoverse also uses gross currency amounts to promote spending more money. For the cheapest Genshin Crystal Bundle, it is 99 cents, which gets you 60 Genesis Crystals, which you cannot even get a single wish with. A single wish costs 160 Primogems, which have a 1-to-1 ratio with the Genesis Crystals. The second package for $4.99 gets you 300 Genesis Crystals, which is enough for 1 wish and 20 fewer than a second. They've made it agonizingly close so that you're more likely to spend more money for another wish. While I think this is scummy, there are a couple games that do the same. Just a few. Fortnite, Smite, Valorant, Final Fantasy Opera Omnia before it went down, Apex Legends, Dead by Daylight, Paladins, Minecraft Bedrock Edition, League of Legends, Overwatch, Diablo 4, Rocket League, MapleStory, Lost Ark, Roblox, Trove, and most multiplayer online games with microtransactions. Granted, some of these games are worse than others, but the point is still there. All companies have one goal, that is to make as much money as possible. But some companies intentionally do as much as they can legally to bleed the player of as much money as possible. This isn't to attack companies for wanting to make money off of their product. Many of those games have hundreds, some of them thousands, of employees and hours working constantly on making their games as great as possible. However, some companies push the line with what is reasonable for the consumer to pay for what is in most cases a digital item that they will lose when said game goes down. That is the gotcha of online games nowadays. That any day the game you've spent so much time and money on could just end. Genshin's endgame content is abysmal. Pun slightly intended. Genshin's hardest content is the Spiral Abyss. The Spiral Abyss is a multi-floor domain challenge where you fight strong enemies in 3 double-sided chambers per floor. For each floor you must build 2 teams. One team faces the first half of the 3 chambers, while the other team faces the second half of each chamber. For each Spiral Abyss floor, you may not use food for healing or buffs, you cannot change your character's weapons or artifacts, you cannot switch your party members, and you cannot level characters up, though I'm not sure why you would do that. The majority of the floor's challenges are to beat each chamber's enemies within a certain time limit. The only other challenge is to protect the leyline monolith, and to keep it healthy while defeating each chamber's enemies. The Spiral Abyss resets every month, with different enemies, but the limitations are always the same. There's a new buff given with each monthly reset that usually coincides with one of the new characters or mechanics released in the month. I believe that the leyline monolith chambers are cool in theory, but rather tedious in execution, as most of the chamber's enemies are extremely spaced out, and it's annoyingly common that the enemies are ranged. These ranged enemies are almost always aimed at the leyline monolith, unless you've hit them and stayed within a close range of them. This means you need to have someone who has huge areas of crowd control or multiple geoconstructs to block the monolith, or you'll more likely than not lose repeatedly before getting through that chamber. They finally added more endgame content recently with the Imaginarium Theater, which I won't comment too much on since it's so new. My initial impression is it's kind of disappointing, but maybe I'm not accustomed to it yet. To the credit of the game, I'm currently experiencing the worst Genshin burnout I've ever had. However, I like that you can speak to the characters used in the Imaginarium Theater, which is a nice touch for one of my prior complaints I had. Genshin's multiplayer is not very good. In fact, it is flawed by design. Genshin's co-op consists of doing a domain several times in a row, fighting a boss many times, or doing someone's daily commissions with them. This sounds good in theory, but this just takes away what you can do in single player on your own. The domains still cost the same amount of resin to do, and the commissions are mostly doable with another person, but the other person cannot talk to NPCs or interact with anything that requires a prompt to do. This means that someone who joins your world cannot start an XP or Mora Blossom on their own, they cannot start a domain on their own, they cannot turn in commissions that they just did with the host until they return to their own single player. On top of the minimal interactions your friends have on the game, the co-op experience is clunky at best. Frequently, if your friend starts gliding on your screen, they will simply float in place and slowly sink into the ground. That is, until they touch the ground again in their game. When your friend teleports, they will most likely appear in the ground until their game loads, unless you also teleported. Then they will usually appear on top of you or under you in the ground. Hell, the statues of the Seven literally tell you to leave if you're in someone else's world. This doesn't make the co-op experience completely unenjoyable, but it makes it feel like the developers didn't want you to play with your friends, as if the multiplayer was an afterthought. Where I have to give Hoyoverse credit is the fun multiplayer events that they have every once in a while. Examples of this are the Prop Hunt event, Wind Trace, the Tower Defense event, Theater Mechanicus, and the many combat events. I guess Genius Invocation TCG is multiplayer too, but I've never been a huge fan of card games, so this part of the multiplayer experience has never been applicable to me. Genshin usually releases an average of 16.8 characters per region, or at least that's the number I got. Some of these characters are insane in the meta, while others haven't aged well, have horribly designed kits, or have unreasonably low stats. Some of these characters have niche teams that they work well in, and others just aren't good at anything. For example, Goro is a strong support unit for Geo defense-based DPS characters, but without a character to buff with his defense skill, he doesn't stand his ground on his own. This is poor design in my opinion, just cause that means that if you don't have a defense-based DPS, Goro is just a low damage support with very low value in fights. Granted, any character through extreme grinding can be made into a DPS, but it is peculiar to create a character who only works with 3 other characters, especially when one of the characters is Albedo, a 5-star sub-DPS, Arataki Ito, a 5-star Geo defense-based DPS, and Noelle, a 4-star healer/shielder. Albedo's skill and burst damage are based on his defense. This becomes a problem as there's only one sword in the game that boosts defense. The sword is an event-exclusive weapon designed specifically for him. While other swords work for Albedo, it is a shame that players who started before the event can never get Albedo's best in-slot weapon. Then there's Dia. She is a 5-star off-field tank. She is unfathomably weak, her elemental skill, she leaps into the fight with an AoE pyro attack based on her HP and attack stats. There's already a problem. Why would you build an attack stat on a tank? And why would Hoyoverse choose to base the skill's damage output on a stat not intended for the character's role? After the initial damage, Dia's skill leaves a field where the skill was used. The field adds an extra pyro attack anytime an enemy is hit with a 2.5 second cooldown given they're in the field. The pyro attack damage is based on, and you can guess it, Dia's max HP and attack stat. Now I can hear you say, well at least it's primarily max HP scaling, to which I would reply, even at the skill's highest rank, it uses 127.92% of her attack and an unbelievably low 2.19% of her max HP stat. Lastly, her elemental skill gives a damage mitigation effect. This sounds good until you see that the beginning mitigation percentage is 32. This maxes out at 56%, but that requires you to get her to Constellation 5, meaning she is still awful after spending lots of money on her. Then there is her burst. Just like her elemental skill, it is based almost fully on her attack stat, and a negligibly low percentage of her max HP. Dia's burst has her throwing repeated punches for about 4 seconds and quickly increases in speed until she does a last stomp that places her field from the elemental skill again. So at least the burst feels good, right? Nope, the damage output is awful and you're locked into holding left click and hoping that auto-targeting chooses well, because if you dash or jump, it cancels the burst immediately. All in all, this is the worst character kit-wise in Genshin, and for some reason, no matter how many fans say it, Hoyoverse refuses to buff this character in any way. And to top all of that off, some characters' strengths are locked behind constellations, meaning that if you want a character to be at their top strength, or just usable, you need to get the character 7 times. Once initially, and 6 more times to complete their constellations. To clarify quickly, I do not believe every character should be a DPS, but I feel that designing characters to work with very few teams is limiting their usability. I'm not sure how they'd fix characters to be more open for other teams, but I know it's flawed to create something that only works if you've spent enough for 2 5-star characters. I feel Genshin is failing to represent the regions it is based on. I think that making every character white when representing countries, cultures, and regions where people are not is a bit distasteful and disrespectful to the history of the people of those regions. While I feel saying just make everyone from those regions a different color is unproductive, Genshin is doing a disservice to its fans and the cultures of the regions that they were based on. Also, anyone who claims to be fixing art is an outright hateful person because fixing implies that the person's art is bad or wrong. There's a huge difference between criticizing Hoyoverse, as they're a huge company that chose the design of those characters, and criticizing an artist who simply drew the character as they are seen in game. The problem is with the developers, it is not with the fans who made art. A game should never add important character stories or world lore into timed events. Doing so takes away from a new fan's understanding of that world or character. Albedo has a whole event about his backstory, but since it was an event exclusive, many new players will never experience it. This is a disservice to the writing of the character. Also, the prior complaint again about his weapon. I'm perfectly fine with weapons being an event exclusive, but they shouldn't make weapons that are the only of their kind that are necessary for certain characters to perform at their best in exclusive events. Genshin does many crossovers, but unfortunately they almost never add anything to the game. Even worse, the one character they did add to the game is highly disliked. Most people think that Aloy is a weak character kit-wise and doesn't fit in Genshin that well. The only other crossovers they had that brought content into the game was when they added new gliders and food with the KFC crossover, which was pretty much solely for the Chinese player base. I don't have much to add here, I just wish Genshin would get crossovers like Honkai has received. We'd love characters from Evangelion, Madoka Magica, and not me personally, but Danganronpa. I'm not saying that it has to be those for future crossovers, but I would love any crossover characters at this point. Here are some ideas I've seen online or thought of myself. Omori, Ib, Hades, And Legend of Zelda would be an awesome way for them to drop the Breath of the Wild comparison. Final Fantasy would be awesome, Madoka for sure. Kingdom Hearts. Palworld would be an interesting pick. Hilda, I've seen beautiful art someone made online. Avatar The Last Airbender almost fits perfectly with their element system. Steven Universe could be cool. Overwatch characters would be fun. And lastly, a completely random one I have nostalgia for, Brave Frontier. Many of these characters are beautifully designed and almost fit perfectly into Genshin's element system. The only thing I have left to comment on is the ideas that Hoyoverse will start but never really do anything with. For example, 5-star skins, even though I kind of think that they're a little scummy in idea. The Sangonomiya resistance plot, this stamina bar that ends after Leeway, crossovers, specifically Aloy's constellations, and finally the Labyrinth Warriors event. Fans loved that one, and we really hope that it comes back again soon. Okay, I am finished complaining about Genshin. This was hard because I really do love the game, so talking down on it for so long didn't feel great. But I assure you my compliments video will be much longer. Hell, my praise for the game snuck into a lot of the problems I was describing. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed and do come back for part 2, the things that Genshin does great. I didn't feel comfortable uploading other people's art in my video, so for the majority of the crossovers that I was referencing in the video, they will be in the description below.